Marcus Aurelius was known as the last great Roman emperor. There's a saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely. But Marcus was known as one of the few exceptions to that rule. Who does he think he is? Why is he so special? Let's find out. He became the emperor of Rome after he was adopted by Titus Aurelius. So he wasn't born as the heir to the throne. That may be important to the overall story. I equate that to like when somebody gets rich overnight versus when somebody builds up the habits and the disciplines to become rich. They know how to handle the wealth differently than somebody who just wins the lottery. When he was living, there were two major philosophies. The one major philosophy was hedonism. What's hedonism? It's the mindset that everybody's here on earth to just have pleasure and to do whatever you want as long as it feels good. One of the reasons that this philosophy thrived in Rome is because they had such an abundance of wealth, right? If you're barely surviving, you're not worried about pleasure, you're just worried about getting through the next day. But if you're Rome and basically you have a vast empire, then you can fall into traps like this, doing whatever you want, as long as it brings you pleasure. And on the other hand, you have Stoicism. Stoicism is the complete opposite of hedonism. Its main principle is virtue above everything, even life itself. So if you have to die and sacrifice yourself in order to remain virtuous, then that's just what you have to do. Marcus is adopted by the heir to the Roman throne. And once the emperor dies, then his adopted father becomes emperor. And then after he dies, then Marcus becomes emperor. And while the emperors that preceded him were decent emperors, there wasn't one like him either before and especially after. Why do I say that? Because even when he took the throne, he still ruled with Stoic philosophies, right? So some of those are courage, temperance, wisdom, and justice. Courage to obviously do what's right and face any fears. Temperance, being able to control and compose yourself no matter what the obstacle or situation you're in. Wisdom, obviously doing what makes sense and listening to your more rational self. And justice, being fair to everybody. And Stoicism is a principle that didn't matter whether you were an emperor like Marcus or Epictetus, another great famous Stoic, was a slave. So you have everything from a slave to an emperor that practiced Stoicism at a high level. Why is it special that the emperor of Rome was doing it? Well, he was all powerful, right? So he could sleep all day, eat whatever he wanted in any amount, drink whatever he wanted any amount. If he wanted to sleep with somebody, he could just have his guards order that person to be delivered to his room. He could kill anybody, chop anybody's head off. He can kill whole cities if he wanted to, right? So having that unlimited power, but being able to maintain complete control was obviously more difficult in a time of hedonism where he could literally do whatever he wants, but important to all his subjects of Rome. And we know about Marcus through historical documents, right? But how we know about his psyche is the fact that he kept a diary. And he kept a diary for two major reasons. One, because he had nobody to confide in, right? Every time he saw somebody, they were either asking him for something because he's the emperor or kissing up to him. Two, he's pretty much the loneliest man on earth. He doesn't have an equal, right? There's nobody that can relate to his daily struggles of running an entire empire while trying to maintain an upright Stoic posture. That's a lot of pressure on somebody. But one important thing is he never complained. Not in his diary that he wrote, that went on to become the Meditations, and not in daily life. In fact, the only reason that we have access to his diary is because motherfuckers can't follow directions, right? So when he died, he ordered his diaries to be burned. But somebody, I guess, saw the value in it, so they preserved it. So now we have all his diaries that he wrote to himself. It wasn't supposed to be published, but they went on to become a great book. But the overall message of the Meditations is to control what you can control. On one hand, if you can control it and do something about it, then do it. But if you can't, and it's out of your hands, then there's nothing you can do. Why complain? And he had a lot to complain about. Through his 19-year reign, he had about 9 children die in early childhood. He dealt with the plague, he had wars, and an entire empire to run that constantly took his energy when all he wanted to do was just live a simple life. What problems do you have that you're constantly complaining about, right? Do they compare to this? Are you running an empire or are you running a household? We all have multiple voices in our head that are constantly trying to sway us, especially when we're making decisions, right? So one of them I would say is very hedonic, right? It's saying take the easy way. Do this, nobody's gonna find out. It's not that serious. And all types of justification for basically anything. And then we have the more stoic of the voices that's saying, no, do what you ought to do. Do what you're supposed to do. Even if it's the harder option, even if it takes longer. It's saying, fuck who knows, you know. At the end of the day, you need to answer to yourself. You know everything you did and everything you were supposed to do. But following the right one over the wrong one is easier said than done. David Goggins said, your mind has the tactical advantage on, right? It knows your weakness, it knows your strength. It's gonna give you a justification to take the easy way in most situations because it knows exactly what it has to say to you to get you to bite. And to learn more on Stoicism, I would recommend the author Ryan Holiday. That's what he specializes in. He has a lot of books. One that comes to mind is The Obstacle is the Way, but he has a few more, I just can't think of them. So after his 19-year reign, he dies due to plague. And he was followed after, which probably makes him stand out more, he was followed after by some of the worst emperors that you can imagine. Even past hedonism, they were satanic, basically. And while we're talking about his death, let's talk about his religious thoughts. So in his mind, he wasn't sure whether there were gods, because at that time there were multiple gods in Rome. But he determined, and this is where he would have used the principle of wisdom, that if there are gods and I do what's right and live in a virtuous lifestyle, then no fair or just God would punish me. But if there aren't gods and I live in a fair and virtuous life, then I'm still doing something good. So whether there are or aren't gods, as long as I'm living in a virtuous way, I shouldn't have any problems. Very wise. Memento mori is a Stoic saying that basically means we're all gonna die. So keep in perspective what's important in life. Yes, we all have ambitions and we live in social groups, so we wanna impress others and we wanna acquire things. But what's most important in the overall scheme, if you knew when you were gonna die, what would you prioritize? I would definitely recommend his book. It's called The Meditations. I don't think I mentioned that yet. But a couple more quotes from it just so you can get a gist of it. Soon you will have forgotten all things, and all things will have forgotten you. And human beings are social animals. Either teach them or learn to deal with them. What's that? You can't just isolate yourself. If people are annoying and ridiculous, you have to either teach them and help them become better, or just accept the fact that they're going to be ridiculous and don't get upset about it. Control what you can control, right? So as you move through life, always remember that one of the most powerful men in the world at the time, with all the temptations you could possibly imagine, was able to control his thoughts, actions, and emotions. And virtues that are embodied by one person can be embodied by all people. Right? So as you're building your kingdom, decide what kind of ruler you want to be. And don't argue about what a good man is, just be one.